Folks, we will be starting here shortly. We are just getting some things promoted around, and then we will be starting real soon with Demian Gover, who is our guest tonight. And we will be discussing the universal spiritual laws. And we are going to start with the law of thinking. Alright, well, it's 7 o'clock, Demian, so let's go ahead and start up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another exciting evening on Breaking Reality. Our guest tonight will be Demian Gover, and like I said, we are going to be discussing the universal spiritual laws. We are going to be starting a series on this, and tonight we are going to be starting off with the law of thinking. There we go. I'll go over to the live screen so you guys can see my pretty face. And so Demian, you want to go ahead and start us off on some things. I do have one section here in the preface. We're going to be using Raymond Hollywell's book, Working with the Law, as kind of a guidelines for what we're going to be going through. I'm trying to get it on the screen there, right?
Sure.
But, and I'll just show you guys the table of contents here. So we're going to start tonight with the law of thinking. Then we're going to go through the law of supply, the law of attraction, the law of receiving, the law of increase, the law of compensation, law of non-resistance, the law of forgiveness, the law of sacrifice, the law of obedience, and the law of success.
Yeah, and hi Josh, thanks for having me on the show. Once again, it's always wonderful to talk with you.
Oh, Demian, it's always great to have you on the show. There's always such great knowledge that gets shared when you're on, and it's always a good time, and it's always a fun evening.
So yeah, the table of contents you just read through a list of universal laws as presented by Raymond Hollowell. And so before we get started, I just want to say we're not going to use Raymond Hollowell's book as like the workbook. Although if your listeners wanted to go ahead and purchase this book, I think it would be a fantastic idea. Go through, read it yourselves. But what I am going to do is, this is one of the books I've studied. There's other books like the Kabbalah. That list 7 universal laws. There's other sources that list 12. And what you'll find is that there's a lot of overlap. Obviously. So let's begin by just talking about. So what are we talking about? Universal laws.
Actually,
where are we coming from?
Before we start, can I read this paragraph out of the preface that really hit me as I was reading it? I was reading through again this morning.
Good idea.
Some stuff, and there's just one paragraph. It's the third paragraph down in the preface, and this I think is something that the viewers, as we start off, when we start going through this series, this is something very important to keep in mind. And this is from the author himself. Raymond Hollowell wrote this himself. It says, as you grow in knowledge, you are able to form better opinions. Do not hesitate to change your views. Remember, the wise man changes his mind, the fool never. There can be no progress without change, no growth without renewal. There must be a constant stream of new thought, better thought, and truer thought, to ensure progress in life. As soon as you perceive the better, let go of the old, grasp the new. To continue to hold on to the old and inferior when the new is superior and at hand is to retard growth. And this is one cause that may be traced to many of the ills of man.
Perfect. And I think many people who, like in our neck of the woods, everyone is familiar with the religion that they grew up with, And in our neck of the woods, most people would probably be familiar with Judeo-Christian um, scriptures. And if you've even heard the idea of being born again, um, you might not understand what it means until you pay really close attention to that paragraph that you just read, because it literally means renewal of thought. It doesn't mean, like Nicodemus wondered, does a grown man go back up in his mother's womb? No, of course
Right.
not. It's like the Apostle Paul said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right. And I mean, to me, I've been on this path of self-discovery and trying to seek these truths and stuff that has led me to what you and me refer to as the path of the mystic.
Right.
And I've been on this path since I started down it when I was 15 years old. And in that time, I have got to say, I have changed my mind so many times on different things when new knowledge was presented to me that I didn't previously have.
Oh, imagine that.
And as that knowledge came, it was like, sometimes it was stuff I struggled with. I'm like, man, is this really the way I want to go? Is this really... Because some of it really challenged what I was raised with core beliefs. Because like you said, I was raised in a really, really conservative, strict Christian household with the Judeo-Christian scriptures, and it was one of those things that you live by the Bible, you live by what the Bible says, and if you don't, you're going to hell. And that just didn't sit right with me.
And let me guess, you were told what the Bible says, probably even before you had a chance to read it, probably before you were even old enough to read it and comprehend it.
Oh yeah. Oh, from as small of a child as I can remember, and as young of a child as I can remember, the scriptures were preached to me at home, at church. We was one of those families. A lot of times we was going to church 3-4 times a week, and if it wasn't sitting out in the main hall listening to whatever preacher or pastor or evangelist that happened to be traveling through the area speaking or whatever. It was back in, the youth room with, whoever the youth leader was back there talking about stuff, or Sunday school, whatever, being told that this is how this is. There is nothing else. There is, that this is the law. And then about age 15, I really started to question a lot of that and seek truths and elsewhere. And I remember the first book that really I read that kind of challenged it was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, sure.
That was my
very little. Let's be honest. It has very little to do with Zen, and even less to do with motorcycle maintenance.
Absolutely nothing to really do with motorcycle maintenance, and like you said, very little with Zen. But it was a starting point for me to start to look at things differently.
Very interesting thought.
Yeah, it brought about me looking at things differently. And it didn't teach me, like you said, it didn't teach me much about, Zen beliefs and anything. And you guys, Tanner's about to pop over one of my shoulders, I think. Nope, he's going to lay down. he was right behind me. I saw him. But, yeah, like, it didn't have much to do about Zen or motorcycle maintenance. But it did start me questioning my own personal beliefs and seeking out truths, which eventually led me to the path of the universal spiritual laws.
And so why do we question? Because religion makes a lot of promises.
Yes.
Right? A religion promises that you will find peace and comfort. And so, my question, that like I ask many people, Josh, was your experience of religion when you were younger, was it always comforting, and did it lead you to a sense of lasting peace?
No, not at all, to be honest. I mean,
well, why not?
It was, to me, it wasn't a spiritual connection, it was religion. and there is definitely a difference between that.
It was social.
Yes, and it was this guy sitting up at the front of the church, standing behind a pulpit, telling me his interpretation of the Bible, and that's how it should be.
And did you get the sense that well, maybe he had an overwhelming sense of peace, and solidity and sense of purpose in his life? You know, maybe he was free of all of his bad habits. And did you get the sense that?
Not at all. I mean, and a lot of them would stand
Seriously?
there. A lot of them would stand there and say, "Hey, I struggle with this or I struggle with that." But you could, I mean, even at a young age, I could see that some of these people that were saying these things, or even the ones who said that they were free and that they had this, that you could tell they didn't, that there were still struggles.
You're not suggesting that they were bearing false witness, are you?
Oh, well, of course I am.
Yeah. I think their book has something to say about that.
You know, it's funny because there's a lot of things that book has to say that a lot of people don't necessarily live by. And one of the biggest ones I see is where it says, where Jesus says, you know, he says, I give you 2 commandments. He says, I come to make a new covenant, and I give you 2 commandments, 2 new commandments. And that was to replace the covenant that Moses had made with God, and to replace the 10 commandments. Now, the 10 commandments we are still supposed to live by, you know, thou shalt not kill, not be adulterers, and all these other commandments, you know, the 10 commandments, which most of us know.
Let's go ahead and use the word fulfill as it's translated.
Okay.
You know, most of them are, he came to fulfill the law.
Right. And the 2 commandments that he gave us was to love thy Father, God, as ourselves.
With all thy heart.
And to love thy neighbor as thyself.
As thyself. Yeah.
Now, that didn't say to love thy Christian neighbor as thyself, or to only love thy conservative neighbor as thyself, or to only love those who hold the same opinions as you do as thyself. It meant to love everyone, no matter the difference. And, you know, that goes for whatever the difference that person has.
And if we're going to have anything posted in schools and courthouses, why are not all Christians demanding that those 2 commandments be what's posted in schools and courthouses?
Because those are the 2 hardest commandments. Well, I don't know that the first one is as difficult to follow as the second one is.
Maybe it's because no one ever sees them being posted in schools and courthouses.
True.
I
don't think I've ever seen them posted anywhere publicly other than reading them in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, imagine that. And I'm not suggesting that they should. I'm being really facetious, guys.
And I know that, but necessarily not all of our viewers necessarily know that. I know you personally enough to know.
I have a very dry sense of humor. I think that's my undoing sometimes. Is people think I'm being serious when I'm joking, and people think I'm joking when I'm being serious. But I like to keep people guessing. So, but no, I don't want to suggest that anything, any religious scriptures should be posted in schools and courthouses. I just think it's bizarre that people have chosen to focus on the 10 Commandments when, like you just said, Jesus really focused on that the 10 Commandments will be fulfilled when you do these things. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
So we're talking about spirituality. We're talking about religion. For people who are, wondering, what are these guys talking about? We're talking about spirituality. And when it comes to universal law, we're talking about the language of metaphysics, which is practical spirituality.
Yes.
If you go take a metaphysics class in college, it'll all be about logic and first causes and a priori reasoning and all of those types of things. But really, metaphysics is a language tool that has practical application. And
Right.
if you're not using it practically, if your mysticism isn't practical, I use this example a lot. It's a lot like learning how to swing a hammer against a board, and you're nailing the spot on this board every single time with your hammer, and you think you're using a hammer, and not once have you actually used a real nail to hold another board up.
Right.
So people are very good at following this spiritual path. They're very good at these spiritual practices, and they don't seem to have ever done anything with them. So that's kind of what my perspective is coming from, is that if we're alive, we're experiencing things, and we've probably been taught a lot of things by our culture that aren't working.
Right.
And we really would like to do the things that we want in our life. And it's not our fault that nobody taught us how. So it causes a lot of confusion, a lot of pain, a lot of self-judgment, and people are looking everywhere for answers, and it's exhausting not knowing where to look. And the answers are out there. They truly are. Amidst all the confusion, the more still we are, and as we read and as we study, the more open and accepting we are, the more we'll start to see things more clearly, and we'll start to distinguish. We'll start to lose the idea that we have to be correct all the time. We'll lose the idea that we have to be able to discern right from wrong, and it'll be easier for us to discern what works and what doesn't work.
And you started to kind of go on that about being still, is that touches onto mindfulness as well, and just being in a state of mindfulness of yourself and your surroundings and what's going on. And I think that is one of the most important points to start from when you start down this path to study these things. If you don't come from a point of mindfulness, you're kind of lost from the start.
How else would you experience clearly how you work, which would lead you to understand what you're capable of?
Right.
So, the universal laws. What do we mean by that? Universal laws. Well, first of all, they're universal. They're ubiquitous. They're immutable, and they are mathematically perfect. Let's think about what that means, to be mathematically perfect. Many times when we talk about God, we describe that God is perfect.
Right.
Sometimes we describe that God says His creation is good, His creation is perfect. But we're happy to say that kind of in passing, but we don't really seem to live up with that.
Right.
When I say mathematically perfect, we're so used to talking about the languages of math. We can hardly separate our concept of math from the languages of math, like algebra and arithmetic and trigonometry and geometry and calculus and all that. Those are languages of math, and they're very easy to misunderstand. They're very easy to misuse. And my suggestion is that God doesn't use math incorrectly, ever. Humans use math incorrectly.
Right. Math is the language of creation and of the world.
It just is.
Right. And it boils down to love as the language of creation as well.
And
Everything that
why?
is done everything that is created through love.
And why? Why would we say that? Why would we say that love is the energy of existence? Because it never ends.
Right. I
We
do. I did have a question come from someone in the chat.
Sure.
Omar just joined in. Thank you for the follow, Omar. And he asked, What do you think about Islam?"
I think that Islam is like all religions. It has as its core a belief that surrender to God, surrender to the higher power, is the way of understanding. And so, when you ask the question, what about Islam? What do I think about Islam? Are we talking about the religion, or are we talking about the expression of the religion? I know it seems hard to even separate those things, but in our culture, um, especially after 9/11, Islam somehow became an existential threat. Um,
Right.
so
It,
so
and
it,
it, it became very misunderstood by people in our culture, because what they were seeing as Islam were extremist.
Right. And so, what do I think about Islam? I think it is the religion and the culture has been done a extreme disservice by the radicals.
Yes.
Whereas in any religion, whether it be Hindu or Buddhist or Taoist or Christian or Jewish, I think anyone would say, please, please don't judge me or my religion based on the most radical
Right.
participants and expression of that religion.
Right, because
So,
we see extremists in every religion, no matter what it is, and it's those extremists that put these belief systems into a negative view. And on the subject of Islam, the mystics within the Islamic religion are the Sufis, and oh my
mhm.
God, the Sufis are such a beautiful, beautiful, amazing people. And I've really looked at the Sufis and their beliefs and everything, and studied it deeply because they really interest me. And to them, they go back to what we was talking about. Everything has to be done from love, and they bring their beliefs from a point of love and try to understand others as much as possible. And I personally have nothing against Islam or any other religion or belief. When I lived out in California, I actually lived really close to a mosque, and a lot of times when I would go for walks, I'd walk past the mosque as they were letting out. And more than once I stopped and talked with some of the people that was out there and stuff. They would stop me, ask me how my day was going and stuff, and here I am. I'm this giant white guy, big beard. I look like, some kind of Celtic Viking. And these people were very friendly, very open with me. They were very kind. And I didn't get anything negative from them at all, ever. And
Imagine that.
I was more than happy to talk with any and all of them too. And it's like you said, it's those extremists that bring about that negative perception of any religion, of any belief.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see more um, uh, acts of violence committed by people from Judeo-Christian traditions in our country than from Islamic traditions. Um, so I hope that answers the question. What do I think about Islam? I think it's one of the many religions that has all of the answers contained within it. And like most religions of the world, it's been much abused by the most radical practitioners that are very often called fundamentalists, which I think is a bizarre um, moniker because there's absolutely nothing fundamental about radicalism.
Right. All right.
So
Let's.
I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think we did. Omar, did that answer your question for you? And we will go ahead and get back onto the topic of the law of thinking, which I mean, what we was discussing right there is it's how people think and how they perceive, and that's a big thing about what breaking reality is all about is challenging the way people think and perceive the world around them.
So let's deal with the law of thinking, also known as the law of mentality or the law of mind. So I'm going to begin by asking the question: um, how do you know what you know? Think about that for a second. You think you know stuff. How do you know it? How did you? What is the process of uh, acquiring that knowledge? What is the process of experiencing that knowledge? What does it mean to know? Do you know through your cognition? Do you know from learning through experience in terms of picking up sensory input and having stored memories that you're able to recall?
Oh, I mean, I think we know from a number of different factors. Some of it is just intuition. I mean, especially when it comes to things on
Sure.
a spiritual nature, where it's hard to put a physical response onto it. It's, you know, it's like I know this cup contains liquid. If I spill it, I know that it's going to make a mess. I know these things for a fact. I know that what's in there is wet, and and those are things that I know.
And you
You know,
probably know some things now that you didn't know when you were 3.
yeah, like the stove is hot, you don't touch it.
And like you talked about earlier, you thought you were told stuff when you were younger. You thought you knew stuff, and then you had different experiences.
Right,
So you updated and reintegrated new information.
right, yeah. Like we was talking about the way I was raised, and the belief structure that I was raised in, and as I got older, I challenged that and I questioned it, and I started because it didn't fit right for me. It didn't feel right. And while that belief structure may be great for other people, for me personally, and my own personal spiritual path, there was just things in there I questioned.
And what about comparison? Isn't comparison one of the most most common ways that we understand things? Using comparison all the way from um, let's say when you're little and you see trains go by and you see they're always black trains, and so you think all trains are black, and then you talk to somebody else and they say, oh, no, I saw a red train, I saw a white train, I saw a blue train. You're like, well, I've never seen those things, so I'm not sure if I know what I know. I
Right,
thought all trains were black. So you have this base of comparison that you have to question what you know. And what about comparison that's used scripturally in terms of on earth as it is in heaven, as the Emerald Tablet, as above, so below, as within, so without.
right. Now,
Lao
well,
Tzu.
and in a lot of the pagan cultures, the term as above, as below is a common theme within all of it as well.
hmm Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching says that inside and outside define each other. long and short define each other. If you call one thing beautiful, you automatically make something else ugly. If you call one guy smart, you automatically make somebody else dumb. So these types of comparisons are ways that we know. So, having said that, consider now this, that every single one of those methods or processes of knowing are filtered through your own mind.
Right.
So, at the core of knowing, experiencing, 100% of it, of your experience of knowing, is filtered through your own mind. So, it begs the question, are you filtering something that's outside yourself through mind? Or what is much more reasonable to assume, and actually bears out when you work with it, is that you are producing 100% of everything you know through mind. And this is at the core of what we mean when we talk about the law of thinking, because it appears that thought through mind and experiencing that thought seems to be the currency of the realm. So, what is a thought? What does thought mean? We're talking about the law of thinking. We are dealing with...
You said thought, and my mind just went back to
thoughts.
the Emerald Tablets and thought the Egyptian god.
Mm-hmm. Thought. Yeah.
The thought.
Right. Yeah. Cognates in language, you never know where they come from. Maybe it's coincidental. So, when we're talking about thinking, we know that we're dealing with thoughts. We know, because we know how language works. So what are we talking about? What is a thought? Is a thought just abstract potential? Here's all these things that you could think. You haven't thought them yet, but they're there, right? In potential. Is thought a single event or an occurrence? In the sense of, I think I like ice cream, or I think I am never going to eat pickled beets on purpose. Again. Once was enough. Is thought a habit of repeated patterns of ideas? As in the sense of what happens when I think I like ice cream, and then I think I like ice cream again, and then I think I like ice cream again. If I think that thought long enough, what happens? I start making connections to other thoughts, like, I'm feeling like my blood sugar's a little low. I haven't eaten anything. I've worked hard today. I deserve a snack. So if I repeat a thought, I might start to get the urge for ice cream.
Yeah.
So thought has consequence. Thought leads to things. Now, so how we use thought it determines the things that we experience. I like to remind people, sometimes people are overwhelmed. They have, they feel like thoughts just come into their head and they can't control them. And I like to remind people that a thought is just a thought until you dwell on it.
Right.
And then it becomes your life.
Right.
But all thought has consequence. Um, some may have a small consequence of, in the sense of, okay, I realize that I'm having a thought that's unwanted, and I need to become aware of that and do something about that. To this, all the way to, okay, I'm thinking a thought, and okay, now I'm doing the thought, or
Right.
now I'm experiencing that thought.
Thought, man, I really want some ice cream, and you find yourself walking to the freezer to grab the ice
Right.
cream.
And repeated thoughts become habits. So, I like ice cream, but I know I really ought to be eating other things, throughout the day on a daily basis. That's my opinion that I think ought to become my preference. But if that's, all I'm thinking of is about ice cream, that would become my habit.
Right.
And so if you're wondering, man, why am I doing these things that don't seem to be working for me, or that don't seem to be healthy? Guys, it's not your fault. You're operating out of habit, and no one taught you that. No one taught you, how to control your habits or how to work with your thinking. We were talking about scriptures a lot earlier, and thought in scripture is symbolized by the word. So, you open your Bibles to, to John, the book of John, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, what does that mean? Does that mean was God talking in the sense of using a mouth and tongue and vocal cords and vibrating air, and because that's what we mean by talking. That's when we
Right.
say words, that's what we're talking about. And I'd like to suggest that the word doesn't necessarily mean something that we say out loud, and it
Right.
doesn't even necessarily have to be in language.
It can be in thought.
It can be in feeling.
Right.
Because it appears that any thought we think is also accompanied by an emotion.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things that you, like we was talking about love earlier. When you have a very lovely wife, Tina, you think, I love her.
Yes,
you have
I
a certain
do.
feeling that generates with that, and that creates a certain perception in your life and your reality and your world about how you feel for her, around her, and interact with her. And that creates a way that you feel within yourself, and not only does that affect you, that way that those thoughts and those feelings emanate from you affect her as well.
Right. And she likes it when I say it out loud.
Of
And
course.
she likes it when I say things out loud. But I don't have to say things out loud, and I don't even have to think them in language to feel them powerfully.
Right.
And while that may be a good example of how thought and feeling are related, I submit that that is the way all thought and feeling work. And passing thoughts might affect your reality in a passing way, and powerful, repeated, passionate thoughts, um, re- they affect your life in a powerful way.
Right.
And well, scientists say that we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Um, the um, the idea that you can possibly monitor all those thoughts is just absolutely insane. Um, but you can be mindful of how you feel. I mean, literally in every situation or circumstances as you're going through life, it takes almost no effort at all simply to examine yourself and ask, how do I feel? Or to
Right.
observe, how do I feel? Now, if you're not used to that, and if you're not taught how to what they call emotional intelligence, how to be aware of your feelings, how to recognize your feelings, and ask yourself whether you're having a meaningful emotional response to a given situation or stimuli. If you haven't been taught those things, it might be more difficult. But just to just to stop, look at yourself, and ask yourself how you feel takes almost no effort at all.
Right.
It might take a little effort if you haven't been taught well, how to understand your emotions, to figure out, well, gee, I don't know. What do I feel right now? I kind of think I feel a lot of things. Maybe I feel confused by the question. You know, and that's okay. We're not saying that it's immediately obvious what
Right.
an individual feels. That's not the suggestion. What I am saying is that it appears that you can't have thought without an accompanying emotional feeling. And since we appear to have some kind of intellectual activity going on most of the time, well, that means most of the time you're feeling something. And if you're not aware of what you're feeling, if you consider the idea that thought and feeling has consequences about how you live your life, if you don't know what it is that you're feeling, gee, that sounds like a lot of things might be happening in your life and you don't know why.
Yeah.
So if a person were to say, okay, so you're talking about, this language of metaphysics and universal law, and you're talking about the law of mind, and so why? What's the point? Well, okay, well, guys, I assume that you are a human being who is aware that they are alive, and you've probably been through some shit, and a
Just a
lot of it
little.
has hurt. And a lot of it has been confusing, a lot of it has been frustrating and disappointing, and you would really like to make sense of it, maybe even change some of it. And the ways that you have been trying to do that, the ways that you have been trying to control it, or the ways that you have been trying to escape it, the ways that you've been trying to understand it have not been working. Now, if your life is glorious and always pleasant and a joy, and you see meaning and purpose in everything, that is wonderful. Seriously, if that's what you're experiencing in your life, good for you. Keep doing whatever you're doing. But if you feel lost and confused sometimes, if you feel scared or angry or just uncomfortable and you're not at peace with your feelings, then what we're talking about in these universal laws is ways of understanding the mathematical perfection of existence and working with it instead of working against it, instead of just letting our habits run our lives, and then we look at all these things that we disapprove of and we say, this hurts, and I feel good to complain about it.
Right.
Well, yeah, I've been there and I've done that. A lot of
Me
time
as well.
complaining.
But I found out just sitting around complaining about something doesn't do anything about it. It doesn't change it. It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't do any
It doesn't
good.
protect me.
Right.
Putting up all my emotional defensive walls and everything, all these things that I fear and all these things that I complain about, it doesn't protect me from doing it again.
No.
It doesn't protect me from other people coming in and doing similar things that hurt me again. Um, it doesn't motivate me to change my behaviors well, I try, but it doesn't seem to work.
Right.
It doesn't seem to solve the problem. And so why is that? Why does complaining not seem to solve our problems?
I mean, we're not changing the way we're thinking to change the way that we deal with something. We're stuck in a negative loop when we're complaining, and we're focusing in on the problem and not a solution. And here comes Tanner. Here comes Tanner up on the couch behind me.
Yeah. and so that's what's actually going on, what you're describing, and the effect that has is that what we're really doing is we're attributing power to another force. We imagine some kind of force in the universe to be a source of power that's outside ourselves, that we feel justified in being scared of or being angry at or being sad about. And I'm not for, don't get me wrong, I'm not for a second saying that fear, that sadness, anger, that I'm not saying that these can't be healthy emotions.
Right.
And appropriate emotional responses.
Right. Like I just went through last month the loss of my mother, and lots of sadness and grief and sorrow through it, and especially throughout the family. Yeah. And you and me talked about this and stuff. And I told you at one point in time, because of my path and walking the path of the mystic, and some of the understandings that I have of this reality and what comes beyond, from some of the plant medicine work I've done and some of the other stuff that I have done, that I have this deeper understanding of some of these mysteries, which we'll go into discussing these later in time. But I told you that it was a point to where I did have sorrow and I had sadness and I had grief over the loss of her. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't the end of everything.
Yeah.
And those,
you knew that she hadn't lost anything.
Right.
That a person losing their life doesn't mean that they've lost everything.
Right. And in actuality, she gained a whole new experience into a whole new realm, and into a whole different level of what she had here. And the thing is, to touch on that, my mother did not fear death. My mother was a very strong Christian, and she had a very firm belief of what would happen when she died, and she had no fear of it.
Which must be more than a little comforting.
It is. It really is. And Mom spoke to us, all of us, deeply about it. And even some of the people that hadn't been around her as long as their children had, knew this, because mom talked openly about it. She wasn't afraid of it. She wasn't scared to face her own mortality. And when it did happen, it kind of came somewhat sudden for the family and stuff. But it was a thing that I know in those final days for her, she wasn't fearful at all. And that she was welcoming that transition, even though I know she was concerned about us, who she was going to leave behind.
Yeah.
But she was not fearful for herself at all. And that was very comforting in knowing that. And like I said, there was sadness and sorrow, which were appropriate emotions to be feeling at that point in time. I still go through moments of the sadness and sorrow over her not being around. But let me take that back. Of her not being here in a physical sense, because her spirit is still with me.
Yeah.
And that is something that will never leave. She is as much as part of me as I was of her. And our spirits are intertwined, and for those of you who don't know, my mother was not my biological mother, but she is the only woman I ever knew as my mother. I was adopted at 3 days old, and she raised me as her own child. So it's not a biological thing. It is a spiritual thing, and it's a spiritual connection that brings that about. So it's not a, sharing the same DNA or sharing the same bloodlines. And that's one of those things that, to me, it carries a lot of significance of that spiritual connection that is still there. And I still feel her spirit around me at all times, to be honest.
And if what you say is true about her coming to peace with mortality, I'd be willing to bet that a big part of that had to do with her religious faith.
It did,
and that she.
And I can tell you that 100% that it did.
And she probably didn't feel like she needed to know everything that was going to happen next.
No, but she had faith that she knew enough of what was going to happen and what would be. She even shared different dreams and visions that she had with some of us of it, and in the funeral services, some of those were read. She had written some of it down. Some of those were read and stuff out for everyone during the funeral services. And she was very clear about things that she had seen and she had perceived.
Yeah.
And she had no fear about that moment of the end of her life, that it would be anything but. She was confident in her belief and in her faith and her thinking that this is what will be, and so she had no fear at that point in time.
What would it be like if we all had that kind of faith and understanding?
I think that's a lot of what a lot of us are working towards throughout the course of our lifetime here. Is we're seeking that, we're looking for that. That's part of understanding those great unknown mysteries and coming to terms with things like our own mortality is, I think, a big part of a lot of our journeys. And some people don't think about their own mortality until, they're diagnosed with something terminal, or they're in their final hours, or even final minutes. They don't think about it until that point. Some people, like my mother, it was something that, through her faith and her beliefs, it was something that she considered on a regular basis and had an understanding of.
If it catches you off guard, it can be pretty scary.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've unfortunately been around people who were caught off guard with it in those final hours, and seen the fear in them as they dealt with this and didn't have the time to really contemplate it and come to terms with it.
Now, on the one hand, some people can say, well, anything that's comforting is useful and valid. And, especially, when anyone who's talking with someone who is scared because they are caught off guard with it, I would agree. Anything that's comforting is helpful. Now, me, I've spent my life contemplating these ideas as well.
Right.
And so, from my perspective, everything has to make sense. I want to understand the mechanisms of how things are working. And, so I kind of have that Sherlock Holmes approach to
Right.
to logic. Once you explore everything and you find out all the things that don't work, well, whatever's left, however improbable, it might be the thing.
Right. And I think that's kind of, I'm very similar to you in those ways. I get very analytical about a lot of things. I really look at things and break them down, and we've had lots of conversations about different topics and subjects and
Sure.
stuff, on air and off air. But it's funny because even in our conversations and stuff, and in our seeking and searching for these knowledges and these answers to these mysteries and stuff, even when we come to the questions where we can't quite 100% answer them, I think we find a lot of comfort in the journey along the path of learning what we find out.
And since we're coming to the final minutes of the hour, and I'm not trying to cut off exactly on the hour, but I want to make sure that that this is an idea that I express here. One of the things that is infinitely comforting to me, that when I really consider it, it never fails to comfort me, is the idea that thought is one power. And I don't mean one of many, I mean it is the thing.
Right.
It is one single power in creation. And we are given it. We are given thought as the power to affect infinite experiences. So while there may be multiple experiences, there may be infinite potential experiences, there's only one power producing all experience. You can call it what you want. You can call it God in English, call it Allah, call it Brahman, call it the Tao.
Great Spirit, the Source.
You can call it whatever you want, but I don't think God cares what you call God. I think religious people sometimes care very much what you call God. I don't equate the universe. When we're talking about the observable universe, that's the manifestation. So if for example, if we were talking about the trilogy of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Samadhi, the Creator, the creation, the act of creation, the three treasures, the Sanbao of heaven chi, human chi, and earth chi. If we're talking about that spiritual trilogy, the universe is that's the creation. That's the Son of the Father. So there's the Creator, which is that mathematically perfect potentiality that must express. It has to express. It has no beginning. It has no end. That's like asking, where does the number line start?
Right.
Where does the number line end? it's an absurd question. Where does God start? Where did God come from? Who made God?
Right.
Um, God is the thing that makes. And, it's just, it's so difficult for us to wrap our minds around it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I gotta say, in my teens, there was lots of times where I sat and contemplated those exact questions. It's like, well, if God made us and made all of this, then who made God?
Right, because we're aware of how we make stuff,
Right.
and we go through a process of thinking and creating, and so we make stuff, and we make something that is partly not us, or so
Right.
we think. We
And everything that we create, like like this pen. This pen was created first by a thought.
right.
Someone thought, I'm going to make this, and they came up with the design. That was a thought.
It was actually created twice, right?
Yeah.
First, it was created in thought, and then it was built
Right.
out of physical material.
Right.
But we imagine that physical material building. We imagine it to be outside of ourselves. We imagine, well, obviously wood or plastic or metal or whatever. Obviously, that's not me, because I'm this, flesh and blood
Right.
being. Anything that I make that has the appearance of being separate from me, that's not me, because we've identified with things that aren't us either. We've identified with our identity, and we've identified with our physical form, and we think, well, this is me, until we learn something new, until we have intuitive guidance from something that seems greater than us, until we have insight into the minds of others. And then we realize, we start to suspect that all of that is connected. And how is it connected? It is connected through mind. And we have the idea that our minds are limited, that we were born as a baby human, and we pick up stimuli through our senses and our sense organs, and that we store a jumbled mess of memories that we make the attempt to recall accurately. We think that is mind.
Right.
But when we're talking about the law of thinking, or the law of mentality, or the law of mind, what we're saying is that your perceived limitations of your personality mind, that is not the limit of what you are as a human. You are capable of being aware of and affecting, working with. You're capable of infinitely more than you can currently imagine.
Right.
Why? Because everything is mind.
Right.
Everything is thought.
Right. I had a conversation several years back. It was in 2013. It was really, really great conversation, and it delved really deep into metaphysics. And it was the whole idea that what is on the other side of that door that is closed, that we can't see beyond, there's nothing there until we think and perceive what is there, and as a union of all of our minds together, we create what is on the other side of that door.
And we can't possibly be separated from it.
Right.
It's not possible. Apparently we can be unaware of it.
So many people are.
But that doesn't mean that we're not simultaneously one with it.
Right,
because
and that they are not involved. Just because they're not aware of it does not mean that they are not involved in that creation process through thinking.
completely.
That they even unaware, they are totally completely involved in the creation process of that.
So what am I creating when I'm unaware? Well, when I'm unaware, when I don't know, when I'm not initiated into these mysteries, um, when I'm not aware, I am mentally creating a world that's so complex that it's filled with people with free will who are capable of doing whatever they want with their free will, and they're capable of being unaware themselves. And so they're doing a lot of things out of habit that are causing them to have a lot of consequences that they would prefer not to have. And so while I'm doing all of my unaware thinking, having all these thoughts and all these habits and attitudes and mental projections that I don't know how they got there. I don't know. How did all this subconscious thinking and all the subconscious choices, how did it get there? I don't know. I'm in a state of unawareness. No one has explained to me these mechanisms yet. No one's explained to me this process. And so I'm left to just, complain that things hurt.
Right. And that's what we're going to be doing with this series is we're going to be discussing what that process is, going through these universal spiritual laws.
So there's the background.
Right.
There's the background of what we're working. The first law that we're going to consider is the law of thinking, the law
Right.
of mind.
That's the foundation for everything else to be built upon.
And no, as kind of passing, I want everyone to consider that all of these laws that we're talking about, these 11 universal laws, they're actually secondary laws. The primary law is mathematical vibration.
Right.
And that's why we talked about math, because the primary law is vibration. Everything that expresses is in a state of movement, and it's mathematically perfect. So the math of fractal mathematics appears to be the structure of existence.
Right, because when we break it down, everything is made out of energy, some form of energy.
Mm-hmm.
All matter is nothing more than energy. And it doesn't matter if it's living or what we perceive as not living. Like, this pen is made of energy. It has a frequency, it has a vibration. Even though I may not be able to perceive it with my eye, it does.
And spirit, the spirit of something, or the spirit of a personality, still exists, even if it's not in a physical form anymore. Right. But apparently it has to take some kind of physical form, even if it's only ectoplasm. It has to take some kind of physical form to interact with the material world.
Right.
So all of the other laws that we're going to talk about, which I look forward to, the law of supply, the law of attraction, law of receiving, etc., etc. If you don't understand that 100% of your experience is being filtered through your mind and is affected by your thinking, then trying to explain these other laws, you're going to imagine that there are two powers affecting your life, and that's going to set up a lot of confusion. Even if we've explained well the law of mind, many people are still going to struggle with trying to wrap their mind around the idea that their singular truth of existence is hidden in their ego mind, which causes them to play a game where they're imagining things outside themselves.
Right.
Other people and other situations and circumstances. And so they think, oh, no, I'm honoring this person's individuality. I don't see them as, some kind of amorphous, non-player character or the
Oh, an NPC,
NPCs,
yeah,
you know,
non-player character.
uh, uh, I'm honoring their individuality and them as an individual human. Well, really, what you're saying is, I believe that they're separate from me and that my thoughts are private, and we're not really related any more than I believe we are. And
Right.
what I'm saying is that there is no amount of belief that you can have that can actually separate you from the other people in your life. They are as much you as your own personality is you.
Remember that whole conversation I had earlier about this cup has liquid in it, and if I knock it over, it's gonna make a mess.
Hmm.
I just bumped the cup and knocked some liquid out of it and made a mess.
Yeah, and don't worry about the vase.
uh,
What if I hadn't said anything about the vase?
oh man, it's funny. But yeah, I mean, one of as we've been having this conversation tonight, and that's really what a lot of our podcasts with you and me are, is more conversations on a topic. One big thing keeps coming back to my mind is meditation.
Yeah.
And when people talk about meditating, I hear a lot of people be like, I can't meditate because I can't stop my mind. I can't clear my mind. And I've told so many people that's not what meditation's about.
That's not the point.
No, because so many people have this preconceived idea that when you meditate, you sit in, a lotus position, and, you
And
put
you,
your
you
hands out,
actively
and you...
cause your mind to go blank,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not about that. It's about controlling your mind and controlling the thoughts that comes into it. And I know for me, there's times when when I start my meditations, my mind races and so many thoughts are just zooming through my mind. And part of that is I'm perceiving all these different things, but those aren't the things that I'm wanting to lock in on. So I'm just letting them go by until I find what it is I really need to lock in on.
Right. And you can practice mindfulness meditation where you actively practice not having opinions about the thoughts as they come into mind, or you can focus. You can practice concentration meditation where you focus on an idea or a mental object to the exclusion of everything else, and build your powers of focus and increase your powers of intuition and creativity.
Right. I was going to say, and meditation is as much about letting all those thoughts come into your mind as it is about moving them out. If it's through meditation where I learned how, when I have a negative thought come into my mind that I don't want to have, how to move it out of the way to bring something else in.
You can't practice acceptance and disapproval at the same time, can you?
That reminds me of what you posted into the group that we're a part of, that you run on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
What was it? What was it? You can't disapprove your way to...
You can't disapprove your way into heaven.
Yeah, you can't disapprove your way into heaven.
And of course, I ended up having a big discussion on that group, and because people ask questions, what do you mean by that? And well, but what about this? And well, what do you do? Don't you disapprove of things? And I want to give people the chance, first of all, because sometimes I write little sermonettes and I post them, and other times I write one sentence lines that I want people to think about,
right?
That I want people to consider, what are the ramifications of this, and I am not suggesting that you don't have the right to your personal preferences. I'm not saying that you say, well, you can say, guys, you can say, I don't want this in my life.
Right.
I am going to choose something else. And that is perfectly in alignment with the laws of creation. That is
Right.
perfectly in alignment with the mind of God. What I'm saying is that when you focus on something and you say, I don't like this thing, oh, but there's some good points in it. And no, I really don't like this thing. Well, why don't you focus on the things that you do not want? Well, no, I'm exercising my free will, and I am choosing to remind myself and everyone that I don't like this thing.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, you're welcome to do that. No one's going to talk you out of it. There are just horrific and painful consequences
Right.
for it.
Right. And yeah, I mean that's such a great point. And just once again, for those of you who are just, oh, Tanner's all caught up in my hair. I thought he had snagged the headset cord, but no, it was my hair. I was going to say, for those of you who don't know, who haven't seen any of the previous shows or anything, Demian is a regular guest here on the show. He's also co-hosted a couple shows with me as well when we've had other guests on. But Demian is the... What is your title? Chief Minister?
I call myself a Chief Minister of Peaceful Mountain Way, of the Ocklava Native American Church of Peaceful Mountain Way.
Yep. Which I am a member of the Peaceful Mountain Way branch as well.
I'm certified with the Mother Church as a medicine person. My wife and I both are certified medicine persons with the ONAC, and we practice a language of metaphysics that we have practiced ourselves for the last decade. And I grew up studying spirituality. I read the Bible in 3 different translations before I graduated high school. Went to college, studied philosophy and literature and comparative religion, and got my degree in psychology, and none of that worked for me. And it wasn't until I started studying the New Thought literature and the language of practical metaphysics that I was able to go back and read all of the ancient scriptures and say, oh, I understand now that people who spent a lot of time
and it allowed you to look at
themselves.
It allowed you to look at those scriptures through a different light,
through a completely different lens of symbolism.
Right.
And it all started to make sense.
And one thing I do want to point out is, while we have talked about the Judeo-Christian scriptures a lot during this conversation and in our conversations in the past, within the Peaceful Mountain Way and the ONAC, we do not strictly adhere to those at all. We're open to all
inclusive
beliefs. It's people of all backgrounds, of all beliefs, that come together in all these different branches and within the Mother Church as well.
And
that make up.
We've been visited by people from Sufi traditions, or Buddhist or Taoist or Hindu or Islamic traditions, and people who practice Wicca, or people who are complete atheists. And we have no interest in convincing someone of any kind of religious dogma.
Right.
We're just there to help people explore themselves.
Right.
And to examine their habits and thinking.
Because why we are within this church and the branch, why we do follow a spiritual path, we don't narrow it down to any one person or any one belief. And one of the things that I have found is that spirituality is unique to each and every individual. That my spiritual path doesn't look like your spiritual path, or Tina's spiritual path, or any other person's spiritual path. that we have our own individuality along this. While there's similarities along those paths, we each have our own individual path along this journey.
And if you look at the center of a circle, there are at least 360 degrees of angles pointing at that same center.
Right. And see, that is a big part of my belief, is that all these different paths lead towards the same center, you know. And in my belief, I usually refer to that as the source.
And I cannot even conceive of a spiritual trajectory that isn't moving back to that source naturally. Even if we play the game of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, hell, even if we play the game of 1 step forward, 2 steps back, eventually every push and pull, every up and down, every in and out is going to teach us something that we didn't know before.
Right.
Now, the more quickly we recognize what those things are and how to use them, the more quickly we'll find comfort and peace and understanding in our lives.
Right.
Well, very good.
Excellent. I think we're coming to the end of this show. We're about at the 1 hour and 22 minutes, and I know we had talked about doing about 90 minutes max. I do have a couple things I'm going to do right here before the end. One of them is Summer redeemed an attitude of gratitude earlier. It's one of the channel point redemptions that's offered through the stream. And when someone redeems that, what I do is I tell someone what I'm grateful for. And I have to say, honestly, I'm really grateful for you, Demian. You have been a big part of my path that I have been taking. You've become a mentor to me, not just as a spiritual leader, but also as a friend. And I want to say that I'm grateful for the talks that we've had, the ability to be able to host these shows and to have these kind of conversations with you, and to just explore this path and diving deeper and deeper into this path of the mystic alongside of you.
Well, I'm very grateful for your friendship. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. It's very nice things to say. Very grateful for your friendship, and I'm very grateful for us to have this platform where we can discuss these things and let people hear these ideas that they might not have been exposed to before.
Absolutely. And then one other thing, Summer Mouse is here. She's one of my mods, and she absolutely loves Tanner. And one of the things that I do offer on my gaming streams when I do those is a howling with Tanner. He likes to howl, but he'll only howl with me. So me and Tanner are going to howl together. And then I'm going to tell you guys what we have coming up in the next few weeks as far as shows. So, TT, you ready to howl? Oh, he's going to give me kisses. All right, let's howl. Ow! 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 Oh, come on. You can do better than that. Ow! 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 Good boy. Good
Awesome.
boy.
He is a good boy.
Oh, yeah. He's just sitting here chewing on my beard. That's how he gets the kisses. Okay, guys. So next week, we have Demian coming back with us for another episode. We will be discussing I actually closed the book.
That would be the law of supply.
Yes. So the law of supply will be the next law that we will be discussing. And like we said, we're not using this necessarily as a workbook to go through, but if you would like to pick up a copy of this book, we're using this kind of as a guideline, a rough guideline. It's Working with the Law by Raymond Hollowell. And so that's what we're using as a rough guideline through going through these laws. We're going to go through them in the same order they're in, and the preface in there, and some of the information that we'll talk about is same things that he touches on within the book. So if you want to pick it up to kind of get a deeper understanding of some of these things that we're touching on, and we're just really kind of touching on them. We're not diving deep into these things, or we could spend
not at all.
we could spend weeks upon weeks.
Them.
Right, we could spend weeks upon weeks talking about just each single law.
Yeah, we're certainly not doing like a page by page, blow by blow rundown of the book. But when people start asking about the universal laws, it's one of the very first sources that I recommend people take a look at.
Right, and then give me a minute here. Let me pull some information up here so I can just look real quick. Guys, on the 15th of February, I believe is what it is, I am going to have Ross Hamilton on. Ross has been on Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, and In Search of Giants. And we are going to be discussing the Great Serpent Mound that is located in southwestern Ohio in Adams County. It is an ancient earthwork effigy that has a lot of mystery that surrounds it, and it's something that even the Shawnee Indians, when they moved into this area, said was in existence before they even moved into this area, because it was originally thought by a lot of people that it was created by the natives in this area, but they said even when they moved into this region that effigy was already built in there. So Ross is an expert on the Great Serpent Mound. He has studied it extensively, and so he's going to be on. We're going to be talking about it and some of the mysteries surrounding it. And then on what is it? I believe the 22nd. David Cannon Wilson is going to be on with us, and we are going to be discussing just kind of finding yourself through your spiritual path.
Cannon, yes.
Yeah.
Dave, good guy.
Yep. Dave asked if he could be on the show, and we talked about some things. So he's going to be on the show on the 22nd. And then on March 1st, I am going to have Mary Guzman with me. Mary is a death doula, and she's also the creator of From the Womb to the Tomb. If you want to check that out, it's womb to tomb .com, I believe, is the website. But Mary is going to be on, and we're going to be discussing death and dying and some of the mysteries and stuff that's around it, and what she does as a death doula and that line of work that she is in. Mary's probably going to be on as a reoccurring guest with a couple of different series along those lines and stuff, and discussing those things. And then on March 17th, which is a Wednesday, we are going to do at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is kind of a unique time for me to be doing a show. Shannon Harris is going to be on, and Shannon is an expert in sounds, especially in working on the aspect of frequency and vibration, and he works with sound healing. And
it's St. Patrick's Day, isn't it?
Yep, St. Patrick's Day. And I think the reason he wanted to do it so early is he's also a DJ, so he may be working that night. But when he told me those times, because I'm like, you named the time, and I was expecting him to say like 9 or 10 o'clock, so it's like a little later in the evening for him, and he's like 2 p.m. Central, and I'm like, oh, good God. But Shannon was on the show a few times back when I ran Breaking Reality on Blog Talk Radio. Shannon is a great guy, and we will be talking about frequencies, vibrations, and healing, and how frequencies and vibrations relate to healing. And we touched a little bit about just that we are energy, and all energy has a frequency and a vibration. And with Shannon, we'll go deeper into that and discussing that. and how that relates to the way that we can work with our body to heal our body using sound and using these frequencies and vibrations to bring things into alignment in our bodies, which I personally have quite a bit of experience with. So I'll be sharing some of my experiences along that line as well. Why we're having that show. So that pretty much wraps up most everything for the evening, unless someone has a last minute question.
Wow, some cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next few months, and then Demian, whenever you are free in March, because I know a lot of it depends on your schedule when you're free and available.
Yeah, it's
We
hard
we
to hard to tell sometimes.
we can we can go ahead and get scheduled out whenever you are available, and I just put up the link for Consulting.com there into the chat. So if you'd like to connect with Demian and find out more of what services he offers on a personal level, on a personal basis, I know you do some life coaching, some spiritual counseling, and some other things through that you offer different services. If you want to touch on that, feel free.
Yeah, and the website's up there, because everybody says you got to have a website, but if you want to get hold of me directly, you can contact me at goverconsulting@gmail.com.
Alrighty, then I think that wraps up the show tonight. Once again, Demian, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always an honor to be able
Always
to sit.
a pleasure.
Just be able to sit down and have these conversations with you, and just to go deeper along this path, not just between each other, but with everyone viewing as well.
Well, I look forward to the next time. I look forward to next Monday.
Yep, next Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Just so everyone knows, I am going to be doing a name change on the channel. It is no longer going to be Big Hempy. I don't know how long it will take for Twitch to change it. But I believe it takes them a little bit of time, but I'm going to be changing it to Breaking Reality, just because that's going to become the focus of everything. So I'm not exactly sure how long that will take and stuff, and so I'll post links around and stuff. You guys will be able to find us.
Well, in the words of the great Adam Savage of Mythbusters, I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Exactly. Oh, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And like we said, we will be back here at 7 p.m. Eastern next weekend with Demian, and we will be discussing the law of supply. So, everybody, thank you for coming out, and have a good night.
Have a good night and be blessed.